Hello, my name is Jaye Johnson Thiel, and I'm an assistant professor of early childhood studies at the University of Alabama in the United States. Seeing the pandemic as an actant that reconfigured the world-making practices and therefore the embodied literacies of living, playing, resting, dying, and so on, I wanted to take this as an opportunity to consider the ways a world embodies and absorbs a pandemic, rather than dive deep into a theoretical concept. In what follows, I will share a data story while offering 3 provocations for viewers to consider and contemplate as they engage with this video. It is my hope we have a chance to collectively discuss these provocations later. On March 9th, 2020, our university and several surrounding school districts went on spring break. By Friday of the same week, March 13th, 2020, we were notified that we were not to physically return to our institutional buildings, but rather teaching and learning would shift to a digital, yet still institutional, landscape. New digital literacies became necessary quickly and without warning. As professors, we were asked to suspend all required synchronous activity and redesign the rest of the semester. In fairness, we were given a 2-week cushion to, quote, figure it out, end quote. Kindergarten through 12th grade teachers in the surrounding area weren't so lucky, as they were asked to transition from a physical classroom to a virtual one over a weekend, and some were asked to figure it out overnight. Caregivers in birth through 5 early learning spaces were given the unique challenge of figuring it out. They had to figure out how to teach online and how to teach in person and how to make child centers, quote, COVID safe, and, equally important, how to keep the lights on and the doors open when these centers lost over 1/2 of the young people they served overnight, and therefore over 1/2 of the revenue that kept the building running. In a matter of days, home, work, school, recreation melded together, creating new geographies, including those of childhood. What once was conceptualized as separate, compartmentalized, now pushed up against and overlapped, making it harder than ever to ignore what Massey would call the thrown togetherness of being, a coalescence of people, places, and things in a particular moment. When one has a seismic shift in the landscape, there are big changes all at once. And as a researcher who concerns herself with the conception of childhood, I was particularly interested in the movements of childhood geographies during a pandemic. So rather than just focus on children themselves, I found it necessary to begin considering the way concepts are being reconfigured, and therefore childhood. This leads me to my first provocation. How is play as a concept being reconfigured through its relationship with COVID-19? Not too long after geographical boundaries shifted, news headlines started rumbling of a new crisis, a crisis that focused on the play lives of young people. I've provided a sampling of those headlines here. Some reassured families with benefits and positive outcomes. Some spoke of loss and deprivation. Some equated play with business and seriousness, while others reported on inaccessibility of play and physical space. It is a fact that the childhood geographies were different, and as a result, play might be different too. After seeing these headlines, and headlines like these, I became quite fascinated with this idea, and for months I spent hours each day searching different configurations of hashtags containing the words COVID, play, and childhood. What I found was what I sort of expected. Children were still playing. As Malcolm explains in the movie Jurassic Park, life finds a way. What I want to share with you now are a few of the things I found online. I am not a Twitter user and that I don't have an account, and therefore everything I found was open to the public for viewing through a simple search. The play I found wasn't all that different, in that it still involved animals, journals, superheroes, and more. One notable difference I did see was that children were, of course, infusing COVID into their imaginative play. Superheroes now needed masks. Family members were undergoing temperature checks with toy thermometers. My own niece was setting up COVID hospitals for her stuffed animals. And as many of you have already seen, the video of the two toddlers playing quarantine. Reporters started sharing play stories to let the older folks know that the younger folks were doing exactly what younger folks do, learning how the world works within the world. This particular slide shows you a story from an article that talks about how play was being influenced by coronavirus. It reads, during a recent game of Doctor, John Miller's daughter was examining her youngest sister. The 4-year-old measured her sister's temperature with a fake thermometer, listened to her heart and breath with a toy stethoscope, and tested her reflexes with gentle taps with a small plastic hammer. After the examination, she diagnosed her patient with the coronavirus and declared, in a matter-of-fact tone, that her sister would probably die. Just as older folks adjusted to life with COVID in their own ways, baking, Netflix, TikTok, young people adjusted in their ways too. These stories seem to suggest that play as a verb wasn't lost or missing or deprived or even too serious. It was alive and well and still being used as a mechanism to make sense of and with alongside the world. While COVID certainly entered into playfulness, children didn't stop playing. They just continued remixing and infusing their lives into their play as they have always done. And this leads me to my second provocation. As adults, we seem to have this obsession with the idea that things only happen in the spaces we have created for them to happen in, such as playgrounds and schools. But watching young people teaches us otherwise. We seem to cling on to this idea that normalcy is grounded in places often created by adults with adult configurations of the world. And so I want you to consider, was normal ever really a thing? And if we are honest with ourselves, do we really want to go back to normal productions of schooling? I can attest that in the United States, many children aren't given the time and space for uninterrupted free play at school, or at home for that matter. And when they're given time to play on a playground at school, it is often for 15 minutes or less, and it's used as an incentive to get children to work longer, harder, and faster. Play inside the classroom is most often teacher-led and sold in boxed curriculums. Children who are most affected by these policies are mostly likely to be those who live in wage-poor communities and or identify as people of color. Public schooling in the U.S. as a practice tends to embody a literacy of neoliberalism, and children are being produced as part of a neoliberal agenda and therefore often seen as commodities. As the two tweets show you here, early care has been seen as directly related to quality job performance, and early care is seen as a way to generate economic activity. Perhaps this can be seen as a form of slow violence. As the year continued and folks started growing weary and going back to work and school, and the ways of knowing the world during a pandemic started to settle into our bodies, I noticed another shift in the way play was being configured. One is that families continued to worry about the deprivation of play and therefore wanted children to have what they considered meaningful play experiences during the summer, calling for a summer of play. And schools started to worry that children had been given too much playtime, calling for a summer of catch up. And so there is this tug of war happening between families and policymakers and what summer should look like for children. This phenomenon is happening across the pond, so to speak. So in the UK and in the US, families are asking for more play and less academics. Policymakers are asking for more academics and less play. And this leads me to my last provocation. Are we even asking the right questions? Now, I'm not trying to work with binary here, nor am I trying to say we shouldn't concern ourselves with the ways in which children get to play and where and how and who gets to play and in what ways. On the contrary, I am simply asking, have we really considered the fact that in both of the ways that adults are conceptualizing play worlds for young people during a pandemic also have the unintended consequences of producing children in deficit ways? One sees children as missing out on play and missing something, while the other sees children as missing out on academics. All the while, children have been playing, have been learning, and in many instances have been free from the constraints of slow violence that neoliberalism and racism and ageism and continue to happen in adults' worlds, that continue to happen in adult structured worlds. So I'm not saying that children didn't find themselves missing particular things like playgrounds and friends and probably their teachers and schools. But what I am saying is, have we considered the embodied literacies we carry with us and pass on to our youngest? Have we asked the young people what they want? What are their desires for summer, for fall, for days and months and years beyond the next one, or for the moments right now in this minute in their time in their lives? As you continue to chew on these three provocations, I will leave you with this quote from Karen Murris that I find helpful for thinking. Modern schooling positions children as knowledge innocent, consumers, not producers, because it is assumed that they are still developing, still innocent, still fragile, still immature, still irrational, and so forth. Perhaps modern families unknowingly do the same. Thank you.